Blessings and welcome everyone. Nico and Rob back here with another installment of the Integrative Mysticism podcast. And we hope you're all having a wonderful end to your 2021. It has been a profoundly esoteric but surreal experience for a lot of us, especially as we kind of move through this loading screen experience for the new year that is not quite complete as we see this dissolve and collapse to be here in this floating point, this floating transitional point. And Rob had proposed the idea of doing a talk all about the old and the new. And since I wanted to kind of see what he was talking about, I'm going to be with you on this one. What You'll have to ignore the dog next door. They just let their dog out, of course. But Rob, what were you wanting to discuss as far as the old and new is concerned? How did we want to go about this? Old and new in regards to what?
Well, the timing is impeccable regarding this topic, Nico, because we are at the time of the winter solstice, which, as I'm more than certain the listeners are already aware of, the winter solstice represents the spiritually, symbolically, the death of the old and rebirth of the new. And we're at a time in our species evolution where the new and the old are unfortunately not in a harmonious integrative state. The new and the old is at a state of discord and is at odds with each other, and it's causing all sorts of problems. And both the new and the old need to come together in order to create the most valuable new. The new is always going to happen. Change is inevitable. We kind of get caught into this idea that, okay, just discard the old, throw it away, wash it out, it's gone, moving on. And that can be problematic because nothing is truly lost. Okay, just because something is old, it doesn't persist or it expires. It's just changed. It's not gone.
Right.
And the old offers us the opportunity to really connect with our spiritual roots, the source power, the source of all creation is old. Okay, so take for example the New Age movement, and you've really kind of driven the stake in terms of the problematic aspects, pointing out the problematic aspects of the New Age movement and why it really hasn't carried the torch of ascension. It's kind of become a joke in a lot of ways. And frankly, in my opinion, that's because the New Age movement was doomed the moment it was titled the New Age movement. Titles may seem to be just a name. No, titles bear power. Okay? A New Age movement, basically, once it was deemed that, you lost the old. You lost the conservative. And by conservative, I do not imply any political leaning. I'm speaking of the word in its purest form, to conserve. Okay? You lost that. And that's a problem because there's a place for it. There's a place for conservation. There's a place for recognition of what was in order to create what will be. Okay? So what's going on is that this kind of dismissal of the old in terms of the New Age movement is a folly because what is the New Age movement composed of? All the old stuff, divination, astrology, tarot, etc., and so forth. This is nothing new. This is the oldest school of the old. And to kind and to say that there's no place for the past or the old in the new, it's ultimately a folly because you didn't create the new with anything but the old.
What I'm getting from what you're saying is we might also want to pay attention to where, in the idea of the modern or contemporary New Age, so much of the material and so many tools that have come out, not only are they not necessarily new, but we may only think they're new because of the heavy amount of adulteration that material has gone through. And so in the effort to create something new, we also have to pay attention to where the old is actually better left in its purest organic form, as opposed to going through a heavy adulteration process. And I do agree that there has to be a reconciliation between progress and conservation. Because if there is no progress, then we fail to evolve. It's one of those things where when I think about people socially who may take a much more conservation oriented stance in whatever regard, and I suppose, yes, to a certain degree, this could also imply things like family and politics and tradition. If you're following a tradition just because it's tradition, it's highly irrational. Really, it is. It is irrational to follow tradition and conservation just because it's old. So there's no examination, there's no scrutiny, and there's only this sense of continuity, which is an illusory sense of safety anyway. So that, of course, does need to be reconciled with the need for progress. If we were burned by fire and vowed as a species never to utilize fire again, we would have never evolved. I think that, however, when the fire gets out of control, it's a sign of abuse of progress. It's a sign of taking things a bit too far. And we have seen that. Absolutely, we have seen that. And not only have we seen an abuse of fire or an abuse of progress in this community, but what I've also observed is that in the interest of making things more accessible and more relatable, we've kind of skipped the teachings that would have done that in the first place, even if we were working with a much more tried and true method, with things that are so heavily adulterated and watered down and homogenized in order to serve the mainstream paradigm, that we're not actually doing anything at all.
I think your point beautifully illustrates the self-evident, uh, basically quagmire we're in. The fire is ablaze and burning out of control, and yet we're still doing daylight saving time. Still, the clock, messing with the clocks. I mean, what are we? This was something we agreed to do in a time before electricity, to basically for farming, for farmers and school children to not be in the dark in the morning. Okay, we have modern lighting now. We can move on from that. So these are the kind of, that's just one point. The other point examples are abundant. The boomers do owe a bit of responsibility to some of the calamity that's going on. At the same time, people coming up through, you need to be a little more efficient in something besides your phone. Okay, just putting it out there. That there's valid points to both the kind of extremes we're witnessing of the polarity here that's just creating more discord. There's plenty of blame to go around for everything, and in order to come to center, we need to own what we're doing, and we're not doing that. And I'm not entirely sure what it's going to require to bring us to that place. Because if we don't come to that place, then we're not even talking at the table. And the discord will continue, the polarity will grow, and the new creation will be a bit flawed, be a bit corrupted, frankly.
Well, I mean, I think that one of the questions I want to ask you is, what do you wish you would see more of? I mean, it's no. You even said it in this video. I mean, I'm pretty scrutinizing.
I mean, what would I like to see more of?
Yeah.
In general, between the old and the new? Openness to the other. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
a recognition and openness of the inherent value that the other contributes to the we, to the us, to the collective. Okay, you're seeing it now. I just go on YouTube and you can watch a boomer rant about how lazy the millennials are, and I go make money in my shop every day, and you're just a bunch of whatevers. And then you'll read the comments from the young ones, and it's just point out, well, look what your contribution to the state of the world is now, and that's all. Now we're in debt and all this kind of thing. So the antagonism needs to stop. Okay, there's enough antagonism in our world where it's just poison at this point. Okay.
Well, I think that maybe if we're gonna kind of zoom out and take more of a metatextual observation of this, one of the things that I've noticed is that there's just such a huge lack of social and emotional fluency in the loudest speakers and the loudest pundits. And I think in order to bridge that gap, that we are going to need to understand that lack of fluency and that lack of, I guess you could say, relational intelligence that is there. And because it's not the script that holds the world together. So if you are more on the side of, look, I prefer something that is more regulated and has less freedom because we all have a script and we all have a role and we all have context into our lives because of the things that we do and the roles we perform and the roles that we assume and project on each other. You've got to understand then you are not actually spiritually evolving or growing. That's not really where it is at all.
Putting an overemphasis on individual expression as opposed to one's progression. Okay, it's about I, I'm me, and this is what I'm putting in the world, and I expect it to be completely accepted.
Well,
Otherwise,
actually,
I
what
won't
I
accept it.
was I was referring more to being a cog in a machine.
Well, that to me, that's yeah. I mean, I guess you could make that point, given that this kind of makeshift assigned individual expression is taking place. So it could foment that.
Well, it's the classic dichotomy of collectivism versus individualism. But here's the interesting thing: this confusion between the two of us from a metatextual perspective is actually very, very interesting because I think that this is what's happening on a grand scale. I was talking about from my observation, role absorption, scripts, and collectivist cog in a machine. We all do our parts. Everyone stays on their marks, does their lines, absorbs into their roles, and that will give you a sense of meaning, purpose, identity, and context. That to me is actually a very big, collectivist utility that holds up a sense of continuity and structure and discipline. And it's true. And there are places for that. But you heard me talking about individualism and looking for meaning through a complete departure from that expression into more of an inwardly focused motivation or something that is all about delving into a sense of meaning and place in the universe through letting that personal separation from the rest.
It's kind of excessive need to express one's individuality instead of focusing on your individual growth without the need for that expression to be so important.
Well, the excessive expression of what one perceives to be their individuality is more often than not an overcompensating affectation anyway. But it's kind of like it's like a one-man jingoist song, if that makes sense. Um, but I guess for me, it's all right. If the problem is both things or both sides of the spectrum have the same problem and fail to reconcile, maybe we could spend some time looking at the similarities and the challenges that they have. And I think that we are all objectively aware of a lot of things like that, whether it's because they cause a lot of collateral damage, they create lack, they create harm, they create dis-ease, they fortify and perpetuate dysfunctional behavior. At the end of the day, it's how we handle ourselves, how we communicate, how we think, and our level of intelligence on a social and emotional level that dictates it. And I think that one of the worst things that's come out of the New Age movement is one of the worst things I've seen come out of the wellness movement, and come out of the empowerment movement, come out of even, yes, the socio-political sphere. Because let's not forget, a lot of the most extreme factions basically did a lot of their recruiting through clumsily disguised wellness efforts. And it all has to do with the promise of fortification and a sense of meaning and purpose. We have to stop looking for someone to put something in us because we don't know how to look inside and see what's there. And I think that when you are in a space where you are constantly letting the fire burn out of control, there is no discipline, there is no structure, there is no grace, there's no honoring of the path itself, then all you're doing is accumulating information. All you're doing is accumulating and hoarding more and more trivia.
And there can be no reconciliation, Nico, without a willingness to reconcile. And I think maybe that might be the avenue to approach the conundrum here. How can we, all of us, promote a willingness to reconcile new and old? We may have to get to a point of incentivization here. Here's the advantages of the integration. Okay, the advantages of the integration are learn from your mistakes. Okay, if you dismiss the old and you're the blazing flame, okay, don't be surprised when the fire gets out of hand and burns down the whole forest. Okay, so what do you think is an avenue to foment a willingness to reconcile?
I think that we're all becoming more and more aware of defilement. And I think that in order to help facilitate and encourage reconciliation in this kind of polarity is to help foster a love, a saying yes to, as opposed to saying yes to what you want versus saying no to what you don't want. I think that people are addicted to venting and purging and bitching. It feels good. It feels good, but it's not productivity. It's like we talked about before. You can't process and be productive in the same instance. You can't.
You cannot be endlessly processing.
No,
Period.
no. If the house is on fire, you need to either find a way to put out the fire or get out of the house. You can't just start doing an autopsy to see how it got started while the ceiling is on fire. Well, you can't. You can. It's just you can, but it's.
Point, Nico.
I mean, you can, but it's profoundly stupid.
Well, you just articulated my point about the kind of malignant individual expression, and it exactly. It's coming in the form of the excessive need to purge, like you say, and the problem is it's just another form of a drug. Okay, if you get locked into that cycle, folks, you're just getting your fix. What is that contributing to the collective world?
I used to smoke cigarettes. Actually, I smoked from the age of 21 to the age of 33. And, anyone who's a smoker or used to smoke knows that, yeah, when you first start smoking, it feels really, really good. And every once in a while, it will feel really, really good. But for the most part, you're just smoking to feel normal after a while, after a very short while. And I think that that is what a lot of people have gotten addicted to when it comes to their purging and their processing and their venting. And I think that, as somebody who has gotten sort of profiled by various political and social factions as being the extreme of whatever opposite they are, again, you can't pin me down because I don't belong to one. But they need to put something into a binary context because they can't handle nuance and they can't handle living in color.
And that's a significant contribution to the discord of old and new, right there. Putting things in the binary context, that's infantile stuff. And
yeah.
You're absolutely right. It is totally contributing to this discord.
Yeah.
What do we need to do to introduce to break the cycle?
I think that we need to be able to simply look under the hood and actually call dysfunction for what it is. I think that, again, we need to first stop enabling sickness. and not necessarily attribute sickness to a group or an ideology or a spiritual path. Because you know what? When I look at somebody screaming in the street or harassing people online or stalking or blowing up emails or creating and inflaming conflict and drama, spiraling on their blog or on their videos, I don't immediately go, oh, that's a typical so and so from the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, or I don't see, oh, this is just some Christian, or oh, yeah, this is the problem with those atheists. I don't. I go, this is a person who is out of balance. And all of the category armor that they may have wrapped around themselves for either sympathy, preferential treatment, or people looking the other way, I don't look at. And I don't look at it with judgment. You can scrutinize without judging people. I don't think that a lot of people think that way anymore. They used to. I don't think a lot of people do think that way anymore. I think a lot of people kind of consider affection and loyalty means a certain amount of enablement and looking the other way. And so we're not actually helping even those who may actually be in trouble or out of balance or sick or in crisis because we're too busy trying to make sure they feel affirmed or feel validated. But the truth of the matter is that validation and affirmation are luxury items that we do need to be able to live without every once in a while, because sometimes the things that don't make us feel validated or don't give us a sense of affirmation are true.
Absolutely. But I also think through the course of what you said, you may have illuminated one of the possible steps towards the reconciliation. And it is simple as stop making assumptions, people. You know what happens when you assume? You make an ass out of you and me. Okay? And if you can remove the assumptions, the world is open and you can come to an understanding of self and other to a depth that is not possible as long as you maintain that assumptive paradigm.
This is going to sound terrible. See, I've got this thing that I do sometimes where I just assume everybody's awake and everyone knows what they're doing and they're totally conscious and cognizant of all of their choices all of the time. I hold people to their boasts. I hold people to how they talk themselves up. I hold people to their affirmations. And if there's a very clear incongruency, or if there is a clear sense of maybe something not necessarily being articulated accurately, an account not being given accurately, or maybe just somebody flat out lying or kidding themselves, I don't continue where they dropped off because I don't think it works.
Well, then you're just falling off the cliff as well.
Well, and it's kind of like you said, do unto others as they would have you do unto them. So what would I want somebody to do unto me in a situation where I clearly lost it and I was, yeah, teetering over the edge? I would really want a friend to be like, bro, you know, I would really want somebody to say, hey, you're acting crazy. And you know what? I don't think there's anything wrong with calling that out. I don't think there's anything wrong with calling me out. So that's what I would go, okay, what does this person want? Does this person want me to maintain their illusion in order to function? Morally, I won't do it. I've got a big problem with that. So I'll just, you know, take you out of the address book and we can go live and let live.
Nico, as we have this talk, I just have this image of us walking down this path, and you just seem to be grabbing these breadcrumbs that have been left for us. And I think you highlight maybe another step towards the reconciliation. Check your defenses, folks. What's going on there, and what purpose do they serve you? Are they functional? Are they dysfunctional? Do they create more problems, or do they create more successes?
And
Check your defenses.
we all deserve better than to know we're kidding ourselves. And I think that because so much of the emotional currency, the social currency, and even fiat currency of, I would say, the last 15 years, but especially the last 2 or 3, has been all about the veneer of esteem and affirmation. We've taken on a very interesting perversion. And going back to the topic of old and new, from my zoomed out outlier perspective, I don't see a difference. I really don't. I look at the New Age and I just see the fledgling fundamentalist religion trying to rebirth itself. And so I can see a lot of the sickness in the old and the new being paid forward. And I see it in politics, and I see it online, and I see it everywhere. And I'm not willing to sit there and fortify it and amplify it and coddle it in the hopes that I can just love it so much it gets better, because I'm not a codependent. One of the biggest challenges that we have right now is being brave enough to look at our own microcosm, to look at our own space, look at our own circles, and see where it's doing, where things are going wrong. We have to stop being in a situation where we believe that toxicity from that which and those which we give preferential treatment is not this, does not bring the same totality of toxicity as the same toxicity coming from the enemy tribe or the enemy camp.
I find there's tends to be a bit of a blindness to the toxicity you're referring to, Nico. There's this, and the blindness and the unawareness of it, it's preventing us from, well, I had to say it, cleansing it out, so to speak. We don't because we fail to recognize the toxicity within ourselves. We cannot perceive it within others, and we don't consider it. When you recognize that someone is toxic, it's an avenue of compassion. Okay, it's not a condemnation. When you understand this person is toxic, you will get a better picture of, okay, what is creating this toxicity within this person. It'll become more self-evident, their behaviors, what they say, how they conduct themselves in various situations. If you are aware that the toxicity exists, which a lot of us aren't really consciously aware of, you can better relate to it, and you offer the opportunity for a reciprocal relation with you. That's what I think we collectively need to do. We need to foster a reciprocal relationship with old and new. And what we're doing now does not do that.
I think a big challenge that we're facing with that old versus new dichotomy is this inflated sense of social responsibility. That was my cat. This inflated sense of social responsibility that comes from pleasing as opposed to truly helping. And whether it's because you are pleasing somebody by just kind of enduring, or you are turning a blind eye, looking the other way, or maybe it is in a more old age concept of following, again, some kind of tradition or hierarchy just because it's there. I think that people are scrounging to, in a lot of ways, create the utopia in their minds on Earth that will enable them to stop having to grow. And again, I don't care what kind of the spectrum you're on. Deep down, we all have to face the temptation of, I would totally just give up my whole process of evolution if I could be in a space where everything was perfect and easy and I could just sit on my ass and not work on myself and not look at myself, not change how I handle myself in relationships, not handle how I relate to my kids, not evolve in how I deal with treatment in my family or in my school or online or whatever. We face that temptation over and over again. And I think that what we're seeing now is a lot of people who are kind of like, look, I don't want to work on myself. I'm trying to find the script, the culture, the hamster wheel that's going to basically be so perfect that I don't have to change, and the fact that I won't change won't screw it up.
And the sad truth of that point, Nico, and those who embrace that position is that it constitutes a delusionary framework that is unsupportive and far more difficult to contend with than the authentic progression.
You and I think we've talked about this before as well. You and I have both had very difficult situations, in and out of family, where
That's
a
an
lot,
understatement.
where a lot of people's own individual growth and evolution was either delayed, stunted, or compromised in order to hold up or facilitate the homeostasis of one person, or maybe a type of person in that family or in that group. To put
And
it
I'm
short,
wondering how would you impose that point upon the collective? Because I'm drawing a collective thread on that point, but how would you articulate it?
well, I would like to say that this is an all sides situation, and first you're going to want to look at your closest collective, because guess what? Your in group co-creates more of your reality than your out group. The people you surround yourself with and your echo chambers. So careful. The big thing that I would say is we have got to change how we handle the links in our chain. We need to be comfortable calling spades spades and focus on solutions. But now it's about, we're not working on treating what is wrong. We are not working on actually treating and fixing the problem. When we go into a lot of these new age circles, there's sort of a weird, and I'm sure you have a lot to say about this, there's sort of a strange self-sufficiency attitude towards very malignant issues that could be related either to physical health or mental health or relational health, that we do need to.
It's the suck it up buttercup attitude that is still pretty pervasive in the West.
Oh, I don't even. I mean, I guess you and I have been exposed to very different things. This is one of them, and I do appreciate your input. When you say "suck it up, Buttercup," I like it, because it's true. There is that, and we've actually seen. This is, I think, a problem of the old. We'll get to the new in a second. Don't you all get comfortable? One of the things, one of the biggest problems of the old is compounded trauma, passed down trauma. Again, that irrational emulation of your formative influences just because they were your formative influences. So we have parents who are the children of war veterans, or the children of families where there may have been a disease that took people young, or atrocities or natural disasters, carrying that untreated trauma and all of the mental health malaise that can come with that to the next generation. And then all of a sudden, that family is all about the trauma. That family is all about the malaise. And that next generation that was raised with the ones exposed, that wasn't actually exposed to the same trauma, creates sort of a telephone game kind of situation where they then pass it on. But there is a completely new spin on it. Now, all of a sudden, it's not fear of a volcano or a tornado or a hurricane or an atrocity or a bomb. It's social fear. It's social fear, the fear of abandonment, the fear of lack of recognition, the fear of a breakup, the fear of rejection. But all of those traumas are still playing out. And so you
One of
have...
the curses. Oh, sorry. The
No, you go
curses
ahead.
of the old is the perpetuation of the malignant. That is the old needs to rectify that ASAP. Okay, the perpetuation of the malignant is fostering a continued perpetuation of the malignant by the new. The new, the onus is on you to come and use your awareness to recognize where the malignant is being perpetuated in order to nip it in the bud. The new can stop it so that when that new becomes the old, it's not perpetuating the malignant.
The new has the challenge of trying to leverage the trauma, leverage the malignance, identifying with it, exalting it. The celebration...
But they have to recognize it in the first place. And that's a problem for the new because you don't know you're new.
Or if you do recognize it and you choose to exalt it or leverage it or weaponize it anyway.
Then you've just rendered yourself the old or the malignant old, to be specific.
You can see why I'm having a hard time seeing the difference in this dichotomy.
It all comes back to unity consciousness, as you always say. And yes, we're coming to the realization that we're not talking about different things here with the new and old.
I mean, there are little
In general.
bits there. I mean, I do find
I'm not
delightful
speaking between you
ironies.
and I. I'm speaking between
No.
just new and old in general.
I have encountered delightful ironies, in my journeys online and everything like that. You want to talk about strangeness and hypocrisy and just, I mean, I'm exposed to this in the spiritual community a lot.
Yeah.
It's sort of, all right, how deep do you want this to go? Okay, you believe I can see the future by looking into a pretty picture on cardstock, but the second I want to talk about the spiritual constituents available to you in an essential oil or your herbs, you go too. I've gone too far. Or you're okay with crystals but not herbs, or you're okay with crystal grids but not candle magic, and it's kind of, it's interesting to see again that sort of delightful irony in, or the lack of irony. They do it without irony. That's even more funny. You want deep, profound spiritual experiences, and yet you don't want to know how spiritual everything is. You want to be...
Because as you said, Nico, they're looking for the assignment. Give me the assignment. What am I assigned?
You're
I
assigned
only
to
want
learn
to.
and
I only
grow.
want to
There.
do one thing. Just give me the crystal. That's what's going on.
I think the biggest challenge that we have right now is our...
Tell me what to do. Fix me. Fix me.
well, that's again, that's kind of, there's a hybrid of the old and new. There is an example of the hybrid of the old and new working both malignancies at once. I don't want to learn anything new. Just give me the exercise, give me the regimen, give me the answers, give me the new thing. I will adopt, copy, mimic, and replicate. That's the old. And I want something completely new to do that to, and that's the new. And so the problem isn't getting addressed. I think that,
Oh, sorry.
sorry, I keep pausing so much. That's my problem.
It's okay. It's because we're coming to the end of the podcast.
I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, if we're going to find a reconciliation, I think that ultimately the answer is stop trying to create a world where somehow you're the only one who's allowed to have the challenges you have and not work on them. Pull the plank from your own eye, they say.
Maybe it's easier to kind of highlight the contributions of the malignants from the new and the old, but you're really turning on to let's call out what both are contributing simultaneously, and that's clearly happening. I mean, both old and new just just give me that uniform. Let me put it on, baby. Let me just take the rank, take the assignment and run with it. And I'm wondering what other kind of commonly shared contributions of malignance you're identifying with old and new.
I think another common share is this dependence on mirroring. When you become addicted to the echo because of the frailty of your psyche, and instead of identifying and looking at the frailty of your psyche and to decide to say, well, I must go find an echo because look at this, you're going to continue being part of the problem. In that moment where you're making that choice, you are going to continue to be a part of the problem. And that's
just substitute echo with perpetuation, and that's what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, what is an echo if not a perpetuation? It's this idea that we get affirmation from echoes and mirroring. And it's one thing to know that you're getting heard. It's one thing to know that you're being understood and comprehended. And so, yes, every once in a while it's necessary to have somebody reflect back in their own words, the message or the communication that you've sent. Of course, that goes without saying. But when we are in a situation where there has to be, to such degree, a mirroring of, to the level of complete affectation, performativity, and empty ritual, in order to maintain a sense of equilibrium, then we're not dealing with the sickness. We're dealing with
false
addiction.
Sense of equilibrium.
A false sense of equilibrium. Thank you. Then we are placating the sickness. We're not dealing with it.
And that right there, the placation of so many of our problems, it's an epidemic.
It's really funny that we're having this conversation right now. I had actually got into making little memes and little slides on Instagram, and I want to read you something just before we wrap up here that I posted a few days ago. And I know you lost all your data. I've been sending things around. I was sending you my drawings and my doodles, and you didn't see it.
Oh, brutal.
Yeah, you bastard. But
Just have to send them again.
Yeah, I guess I'll send them again. So this is what I wrote on December 11th. So yeah, just a little over a week
The
ago.
old phone died and the new phone was born. But sorry to interrupt.
That's all good. Yeah, no, I'm waiting for this year because I'm like, oh crap. I usually end up going through computers once every 2 years, so I'm not looking forward to that. But this is what I wrote on the 11th. And it's so funny we're talking about this now. In a time where image, relatability, and confirmation echoes are currency, just remember, demonstration outclasses impression, wisdom outlasts affirmation, evolution outgrows statistics, assent overrides conformity, authenticity outvalues performativity, solutions outperform appeasement, and transformation outshines fortification.
That's what needs to. Okay, reconciliation, yes, needs to happen. If old and new can just work on its own efficiency, it may organically arise, the reconciliation.
Something isn't successful just because it goes on, and something isn't a failure just because it's over. And we have a problem, a continuity addiction as an animal, the animal body, not the spiritual body, but the animal body. And we have so much of our own lower instincts still yearning for affirmation and validation in this society that um, the things that we have done to try and gain context into that confusion have only made us sicker. You know, I'm a big fan of, you know, anyone who wants to take on, you know, some self-mastery, personal development work to facilitate their own evolution. But at the same time, if your definition of controlling your urges stops at what you eat and sexual activities, I'm sorry, you're just not there. Because your urge is to blow up, your urge is to scream and yell, your urge is to rave, your urge is to do God knows what, also need to be under your control. It's not just about the food you put in your mouth and what you do with others and yourself. That's a cop out. I think that when we are in a space where we are willing to settle for a contrivance for a sense of order, we're only going to keep perpetuating the old problem. And when we decide to just settle for incoherence because it feels good, it feels purging, and it feels authentic, maybe it is, but it's certainly not something of grace, and it's not something of efficiency, and it's not something productive, then we're going to stay in the new problem. And if we want to fix them both, we need to just actually focus on the problem.
Focusing on the problem. It does not constitute seeking control over each other.
Right.
That is one of the banner men of the discord between the old and the new.
If you think you need everyone to stay on the script, run their households, live their love lives, and work their jobs the way you do, so you have a sense of continuity and security in the world, and your traditions are sovereign, so you don't have to evolve because now you've found a way to just kind of go back to sleep. You know, you're the saboteur from the first Matrix movie, and you don't even know it.
When
Through
you're
hell.
the one the whole time.
Yeah.
You're not choosing to be.
You're not choosing to be, yeah.
Yes.
And if you're deciding that maybe it would just be easier to kind of not work on yourself and rather leverage the pain and suffering and confusion you have as a means of distracting yourself from your own responsibilities, you're still technically playing a game that was written for you and you don't even know
What are
it.
we all over identifying with? Are we if you're over identifying with pathology, well, it's easy to identify what your creation is.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the wake of so much revelation, people are still looking for new distractions. The more we learn about ourselves, the more scared I've seen a lot of people be. There are very interesting lines drawn in the sand around what we're okay to examine and scrutinize and what we are not, and what we are okay to eliminate from the past and what we should preserve. And the lines in the sands don't make any sense because a lot of it is emotional reasoning.
They're not congruent with the true nature of our being.
No, it's irrational. I mean, not to say that rationality is virtue, because being overly rational is not really a sign of virtue either. But when I say irrational, I'm just saying that's usually more emotional reasoning, which again, that's an emotional body problem. Being overly rational has its own set of problems. That's a mental problem, mental body problem, and we're trying to transcend them both here. Earth, demonstrate that you can go your own way, create your own spiritual discipline, and innovate and create progress that is both not only socially serviceable, but also transforms a lot of the old damage that was done to the planet without necessarily repeating the same mistakes. Can you do that? Can you make evolution about always going forward?
And in a nutshell, I just can't help but say, get your learn on.
Get your learn on.
Start learning.
Well,
old
guys.
And new, and omnipresent and not.
Yeah. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this extra long podcast. Any closing thoughts, Rob?
Just stay peaceful. Stay peaceful, I think, is one of the answers.
It's the chief answer.
And orient yourself towards peace.
Absolutely.
It's a useful compass.
So y'all take care. We will see you all again soon. If we do not see you beforehand, hope you have a wonderful new year and have a very, very blessed start to your 2022.